Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. Nestled in the quiet outskirts of Silver Creek, a small town in the Midwest, a sense of peace reigned. The mornings greeted residents with sun rays peeking through the canopy of maple and oak trees, and the evenings wrapped the town in a warm, golden glow as neighbors exchanged pleasantries on their front porches. But beneath the surface of this idyllic facade, shadows lingered, shadows that would soon morph into a darkness no one in the town could foresee. It was a Tuesday morning in late autumn when the tranquility was shattered. The distant peal of church bells clattered in the crisp air as the local high school's principal discovered a grim sight while attending a routine inspection of an abandoned property on the edge of town. An old farmhouse shrouded in neglect. What had once been a cheerful home now stood in disarray, paint peeling like memories forgotten. Upon stepping inside, a pungent smell engulfed him, the staleness of decades left untouched. He followed the scent deeper into the house, and that was when he stumbled upon the unimaginably lifeless body of a woman tucked away inside a closet, hidden beneath moth-eaten blankets. Her dark hair spilled across her face, obscuring the identity of the victim. It was a sight that would haunt him, and soon the entire town, for years to come. As the news rippled through Silver Creek, curiosity turned to dread. Who was this woman? What circumstances had led her to this deadly end? As the clock ticked forward, the whispers of the townsfolk would coalesce into a cacophony, each person grappling with the realization that darkness could envelop even the most tranquil places. The investigation had begun, and no one would be untouched by the revelations to follow. The victim. As details emerged from the crime scene, a name surfaced amidst the whispers: Laura Hargrove. At 32, she was a familiar figure in Silver Creek, an elementary school teacher known for her gentle disposition and unwavering dedication to her students. Her bright smile had always been unspoken reassurance to parents, a beacon of hope in a world where innocence needed protection. In the midst of laughter and the rustle of paper in the classroom, Laura had cultivated a nurturing atmosphere. But outside those walls, few knew the depth of her struggle. Laura had moved back to Silver Creek 3 years prior, fleeing the chaos of a past that had spiraled beyond her grasp. The loss of her father, followed closely by the dissolution of her marriage, tightly wound her heart in a coil of grief and despair. Returning to the town where she had spent her childhood was supposed to be a fresh start, a sanctuary from her fractured life. But behind the cheerful facade, Laura wrestled with feelings of isolation and loneliness. Investigators looked into her recent life, scouring her social media accounts and sifting through interactions with friends and colleagues. There were signs of her tireless spirit: photos of her children at school events, snapshots from local hikes, and fleeting moments of joy that seemed to tell a story of resilience. Yet below the surface, there were also troubling posts, vague allusions to the weight she carried, these breadcrumbs weaving a complex tapestry of her inner turmoil. Friends stated she had spoken little of her past, only sharing snippets during quiet coffee dates that felt safe. However, the night of the incident clung heavily in their minds. Laura had mentioned meeting someone, a newcomer to town, a man she had seemed excited about. While they hoped for her happiness, a lingering concern roamed their hearts about who he might be. As journalists hounded the story, eager for every morsel of gossip, the question loomed: was he a friend or a harbinger of the darkness that now threatened to engulf them all? The crime scene. The farmhouse loomed over investigators like a sentinel of secrets as they arrived at the scene. The cracked window panes and peeling paint hardly suggesting the horror that lay within. The crisp autumn air was laced with a hint of dampness as the morning fog clung desperately to the ground, shrouding the property in an eerie silence. Detective Mark Callahan, who had been with the Silver Creek Police Department for over a decade, was determined to piece together the puzzle of Laura Hargrove's tragic end. As he stepped into the dimly lit interior, the scene unfolded like a grotesque painting, each brushstroke revealing a tragic narrative. The remnants of a life interrupted surrounded him-faded photographs adorned the walls, once capturing laughter and love, now serving as solemn witnesses to the grim reality. The air was thick with a stale odor, tinged with the sharpness of decay. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he approached the closet where Laura's body lay. Beneath the scattered remnants of her life, the officer's flashlight illuminated Laura's lifeless form, partially concealed by fraying blankets reeking of dampness. The ligature marks around her neck sent a shiver down the detective's spine. It was a violent end, a struggle that had shattered the safety of her world, and he felt the weight of her fate pressing down upon him. The forensic team began their meticulous examination, storing evidence collected from the scene: hair fibers, a small bloodstain on the floor, and the fabric from her clothing. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the room, Mark's focus shifted to the few belongings lying around. A crumpled piece of paper caught his eye. It appeared to be a hastily scrawled note, its ink barely legible. He carefully held it up, wondering if it might offer clues to her last moments, an intimate glimpse into fear, desperation, or perhaps a final message. Each moment the investigation unfolded brought Mark closer to the truth, breathing an urgency into his stride. He couldn't shake the feeling that Laura's tragic fate was only the first ripple in an expanding tide, destined to engulf them all. The early investigation. The days following Laura Hargrove's discovery were a blur of urgency and anxiety for the small-town police department. The once quiet streets of Silver Creek were now alive with the frenetic energy of investigators piecing together the tragic puzzle of her death. Detective Mark Callahan, along with his partner, Officer Rachel Mendoza, sat hunched over a conference table littered with photographs and notes. The air crackled with intensity. They were determined to unearth the truth. At the heart of their investigation was the question of who last saw Laura alive. They canvassed the town meticulously, retracing her steps over the past week. Conversations with colleagues and students revealed she had been unusually withdrawn, her laughter dimmed by an invisible weight. Yet, the whispers of her recent excitement about a new romance introduced a flicker of intrigue. Mark leaned back, pondering the implications. Was this man the key to unlocking her final hours? They followed leads, interviewing friends and acquaintances who had seen her recently. One sophomore at the local high school mentioned hearing Laura share a fleeting moment of joy about meeting someone new. The girl described a casual dinner at a nearby restaurant, where Laura's eyes sparkled for the first time in months. The sentiment resonated deeply within Mark. Perhaps this man held answers, but he was elusive, his name a ghost on the periphery of memory. With urgency fueling their efforts, they investigated local video footage from the restaurant where Laura had been seen. Grainy images revealed her animated laughter surrounded by friends, but they offered no clues about the mysterious man. Despite their frustrations, the detectives' resolve only strengthened. Documenting leads in a journal, Officer Mendoza noted the names of everyone connected to Laura. Old friends, new acquaintances, and well-known figures in the town. Each entry was a thread in a tapestry woven with loss and mystery. Outside, the autumn leaves rustled with the wind, as if nature itself murmured secrets. As Mark stared out at the vibrant canvas of red and gold, he realized stakes were rising. With each passing day, the momentum of dread intensified. Time was running out to piece together the fragments of Laura's past. But one fact remained clear. They were not just investigating a murder, they were chasing shadows in a familiar nightmare, every moment growing heavier with implications. The dead ends. The following week unfurled like an unending maze for Detective Mark Callahan and Officer Rachel Mendoza. Despite their relentless pursuit, each lead seemed to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. Numerous interviews yielded little of substance, and with every unanswered question, the specter of frustration grew heavier. Faces blurred together into a fog of acquaintances, each story tinged with uncertainty and suggestion. Laura's colleagues, while sympathetic, offered little more than vague observations about her mood fluctuations. One described a moment when Laura had received a text during lunch, her demeanor shifting like the tides from vibrant to reflective. Unable to trace the source of that compelling message, Mark felt the knot in his stomach tighten. The text could have been a lifeline or a harbinger of danger. Each possibility weighed equally heavy on him. In the small confines of the local diner, Mark received a call from the forensic team. Their results revealed no immediate DNA matches from the evidence collected at the farmhouse. Hair fibers found at the scene didn't belong to Laura or any person of interest from their interviews, resetting the detectives' hopes to zero. It was a harsh reminder that the world could hide within layers of an unyielding veil. Mark crumpled the paper napkin in his hand, frustrated by the dead ends closing in around them. Rachel suggested reaching out to local bars and social venues, hoping to unearth information from patrons who might have interacted with Laura. A visit to a charming little pub around the corner yielded a flicker of insight from a bartender who remembered seeing Laura with a man named Jake, an enigmatic figure who seemed to drift through town unnoticed. In the bartender's eyes there was uncertainty, as though recognition and discomfort danced together. She seemed happy to be with him. He hesitated luxuriously, cleaning a glass, but there was something off, like her laugh. Mark jotted down the name, keenly aware that hope was a fragile thing. The man had garnered enough of a reputation, but had he also cast a shadow deep enough to hide intentions? As they pursued the new lead, a sense of foreboding crept in. Questions multiplied while answers remained evasive, intertwining like the bare branches outside, reaching for something just out of grasp. The clock ticked louder, and amidst echoes of quiet desperation, a chilling thought loomed. What if the answers lay not just beyond their reach, but in places no one dared to look? A break in the case. The rainy season had arrived in Silver Creek, casting a gray, heavy pall over the town. The constant drumming against the roof created a rhythm that echoed the tension at the police station. Detective Mark Callahan sat at his desk, staring at the myriad of papers scattered before him, trying to make sense of the cacophony of leads and dead ends. Just when the conditions seemed to conspire against them, a glimmer of hope pierced through the gloom. It was mid-afternoon when Officer Rachel Mendoza burst into the room, her expression lit with urgency. In her hands was a document, the results of a search warrant they had executed on Jake Lampert, the man last seen with Laura. The details of his history began to unfurl in front of them, stark and chilling. Jake was a local contractor, a transient personality in Silver Creek. But his past held shadows. A record of minor offenses marred his life. But more troubling was a previous charge at his last residence, an incident involving a woman he had been dating. The connection was undeniable, and as they read deeper into the testimony, it became clearer that Jake had a pattern. Charm that masked volatility. Could he have wanted more from Laura than she was willing to give? Mark pondered aloud, his voice edged with rising determination. They had finally stumbled upon a potential motive and a tangible link to Laura's tragic circumstances. It was a lid that breathed life into their pursuit once more. Rachel wasted no time reaching out to the investigator who had handled Jake's earlier case. Their conversation unraveled the tightly wound threads of the past further. Jake had been deemed an unstable individual who had struggled with commitment and unpredictability. The investigator recalled similar themes in Jake's relationship history, relationships characterized by love that curdled into obsession. As anticipation crackled in the air, Mark and Rachel prepared for a new round of interviews, focused on Jake's acquaintances, neighbors, and anyone who could cast further light on his recent interactions with Laura. The path ahead, though still fraught with uncertainty, felt charged with possibility. Confidence ignited a resurgence of hope. Perhaps this dark tide that had engulfed Silver Creek was at last beginning to recede. However, as they scheduled another meeting with Jake, Mark couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. An unspoken awareness loomed in the back of his mind. Uncovering the truth might expose them to dangers they couldn't foresee. As the rain continued to fall, it washed away nothing but the surface beneath it lay, the murky depths of human nature, waiting to be explored. The suspect. On a crisp Thursday morning, Mark and Rachel prepared to confront the complexity of their main suspect, Jake Lampert. They arrived at his property, a modest residence on the outskirts of town, where the aroma of brewing coffee seeped through the cracks of the antiquated windows. The air was thick with anticipation as they stepped toward the door and entrance to both the man himself and the tangled threads of Laura's fate. As they knocked, footsteps echoed within. Moments later, Jake appeared, his casual demeanor layered with an unsettling calm. He sported a well-groomed beard, and his eyes flickered with curiosity as he greeted them. Mark felt an unsettling intuition rise as he observed the warmth of Jake's smilelight was the kind that disarmed, but also shielded, masking truths he wasn't yet ready to reveal. "Detectives, what brings you here?" Jake asked, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "We have some questions regarding Laura Hargrove." Rachel began, watching closely for any cracks in his composure. The name hung in the air, prompting a barely perceptible shift in Jake's demeanor, tightening around the eyes. A slight deepening of breath. "Yeah? I heard about her tragic," he replied, feigning surprise. "We only had dinner once a few weeks ago." It was nothing serious. Mark exchanged a glance with Rachel, gathering the threads of the prior investigation and the testimonies they had uncovered. "You were seen together after that," he pressed. "Did you meet again after dinner?" Jake leaned against the doorframe, a casual gesture laced with arrogance. "Look, we talked a bit. She was a nice girl, a bit too nice for my taste, to be honest." I'm not looking for anything serious right now. Rachel noted the defensiveness that flickered behind his confident exterior. An undeniable tension rippled beneath their conversation, and she pushed forward. What can you tell us about your last interaction? Do you remember the details? I don't have anything to hide, he replied, his voice dipping slightly, revealing an edge of irritation. I told you, it was casual. I'm not the only one in town who saw her, you know. But as Mark studied his eyes, the suppressive layers of emotion stirred like water under a placid surface. Each response felt rehearsed, scripted. Something was lurking just beyond Jake's polished words. People talk, Mark interjected, trying to steer the conversation. We heard you had a few concerning relationships before Laura. Can you elaborate? Jake's expression faltered briefly, a crack in the well-groomed facade. That's in the past, he snapped, transitioning to defensiveness. I've changed. I promise you I had nothing to do with what happened to Laura. With each word, Mark felt the weight of his denial. The struggle for control slipping through Jake's fingers. The interaction began to resemble a game of chess, revealing pieces of his character pride, fragility, anger. As they wrapped up their questioning, Jake's signature smile faded, replaced by a hardening facade. They were left with a feeling that this encounter was only the opening act. The deeper truth about Jake Lampert was still cloaked in shadows. As they debriefed outside, Mark turned to Rachel. We need to uncover more about his past. What lies beneath that charm might be the key to understanding Laura's fate. The investigation was bouncing precariously on the edge of revelation, a tipping point that could evade them or launch them into the heart of the mystery at hand. The trial. The air crackled with tension as the courtroom doors swung open, their creak echoing through the hushed atmosphere. Silver Creek had never witnessed anything like this. The trial of Jake Lampert for the murder of Laura Hargrove had attracted attention from neighboring towns and media, all eager to witness the unfoldings of a case that had shattered the tranquility of their beloved community. Seated at the prosecution table, Detective Mark Callahan felt the weight of his years spent investigating this tragic loss press down on him. Each piece of evidence, every whispered accusation, had led them to this moment. He glanced at Rachel, who sat beside him, her face a mask of determination. They had poured themselves into every detail, navigating through heart-wrenching testimonies and painstakingly constructing a case that revealed the truth they sought. As Jake entered the courtroom, an unsettling calm enveloped him, his smile eerily intact. It was a chilling contrast to the sorrow that hung in the air. The reality of the empty chair where Laura should have been a poignant reminder of what had been lost. The prosecution opened with a harrowing recounting of Laura's life, painting a picture of a dedicated teacher whose dreams were cruelly snatched away. Witnesses took the stand, sharing the lingering memories of her warmth. The impact of her sudden absence weighed heavy in their words. When the bartender testified about Jake's behavior the night they last saw Laura, a murmur rumbled through the spectators. It was no longer a whisper, but the collective realization of Jake's volatility. Then came the forensic evidence. A skilled analyst described the bloodstains found at the crime scene, linking them conclusively to Jake. Mark felt the pulse of the courtroom quicken. Undercurrent of disbelief. Yet, as the defense took its turn, Jake's attorney painted a counter-narrative, suggesting that Laura's life was marred by struggles he could not fathom. They labeled Jake a scapegoat, a pawn in a tragic tale where the complexities of Laura's mental health eclipsed the truth. The implications hung heavy, leaving a trail of doubt that clawed at the edges of the jury's resolve. As Mark listened, he felt a surge of anger and frustration bubble within him. This was not just a case. It was the life of a woman who had inspired so many. He had witnessed her struggles through the testimonies of friends. With each line of accusation, there was something more pervasive at play, an attempt to twist the narrative, to shift blame from the man responsible. Finally, it was Mark's turn to take the witness stand. As he recounted the investigation, each statement pulled the weight of Laura's story into the open, illuminating a path of loss and desperation. The prosecutor's questions cut through the air, brisk and pointed, unraveling Jake's demeanor, lies, the misplaced sympathy, and the darkness he had cast over Laura's life. Days turned into tension-filled weeks as the trial progressed, each side fighting tooth and nail to impose their will. Finally, the moment came. The judge instructed the jury to deliberate. The tension in the room escalated, as if time itself had come to a standstill. Eventually, the jury returned, their solemn faces betraying secrets held for too long. Mark's heart raced as the verdict was read. Guilty of murder. The words hung heavy in the air, a powerful finality that sealed Jake Lampert's fate. As a chill washed over the courtroom, a quiet applause erupted from Laura's friends. But Mark felt a bittersweet Victoria life had been reclaimed. Yet the scars would linger for all who knew her. In the aftermath, Mark looked out into the quiet streets of Silver Creek. There was a weight that remained. A reminder that while one chapter had closed, the stories of those left behind carried on, intertwined in the fabric of a town that would remember Laura Hargrove. Her laughter echoed in every corner of the homely, quiet streets they would not forget. The aftermath. As the gavel struck for the last time, the reality of the verdict resonated through the corners of Silver Creek, casting an indelible mark on the fabric of the town. The once animated discussions in the cafe turned solemn. Friends shared their grief over coffee cups growing cold, while parents, who once considered their surroundings like a cocoon, now watched with wary eyes and tighter grips on their children's hands. Detective Mark Callahan leaned against the cool glass of the police station window, the weight of the trial's conclusion wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. Though Jake Lampert would face incarceration for his crimes, a feeling of emptiness hovered in the aftermath. Laura's story, one of hope and tragedy intertwined, lingered in the recesses of his mind, demanding to be honored in more than just a verdict. In the weeks following the trial, the townsfolk organized a memorial and scholarship fund in Laura's name, a gesture that celebrated the life she had lived, even as they mourned its sudden end. Mark attended the memorial, surrounded by familiar faces painted with sorrow. The sun hovered low in the sky, illuminating the makeshift altar filled with flowers, photographs, and notes of love. Laura's laughter echoed in their recollections, memories woven into the hearts of everyone who knew her. As speeches unfolded, words of remembrance transformed into declarations of purpose. Friends recounted how she inspired children to cultivate their passions, the same passions that had gone unnoticed in the rush of their everyday lives. Through her memory, they vowed to create opportunities for youngsters in the community, echoing Laura's dedication to education. Mark felt a flicker of warmth and the chill of grief, a realization that this small town, once dominated by fear, was now rallying around memories drawn from love. In the quiet of his apartment that evening, Mark replayed the case in his mind, reflecting on the intricacies and fragilities of human connection. The investigation had not just exposed a killer, but illuminated the underlying fears that had so intently loomed over Silver Creek. While justice had been served, the deeper questions about societal responsibility lingered like an unfinished sentence. Days turned into months, and the scars of Laura's murder became faded echoes of a tragedy still present yet evolving. Some families drew closer, their conversations rooted in shared struggles. Others found themselves distanced, the reality of danger shifting their worldviews. The pendulum had swung, but as time passed, cracks formed in the facade of fear, revealing pathways that never existed before. Mark realized he would carry Laura's story as a personal mission, a reminder that each life lost could sow courage and awareness in communities. He became an advocate for educational programs aimed at healthy relationships and awareness, hoping to unearth the conversations that had been brushed aside for too long. As he walked through the town, now vibrant with life and blooming foliage, he caught sight of the school where Laura had taught. The walls, once filled with lessons learned, now echoed with laughter from children playing outside, creating a moment of clarity. Life would persist, as relentless as the seasons turning. With each passing blossom, every fresh leaf, Laura's spirit whispered softly, reminding him that even in the depths of pain, meeting, resilience, and boundless possibility could emerge, leaving an immeasurable impact on of healing. Reflection. As the months dwindled into years, the impact of Laura Hargrove's case continued to ripple through Silver Creek, reshaping the landscape of the town in profound ways. Detective Mark Callahan often found himself wandering those familiar streets, reflecting on the journey from tragedy to transformation. Each corner, each home carried fragments of her story, echoing her laughter, aspirations, and the irreplaceable absence that remained. Through the memorial scholarship, new generations flourished, young minds blossoming into creative thinkers and compassionate leaders. Students who once struggled to find their footing flourished under the influence of educators inspired by Laura's legacy. They channeled her unwavering spirit, a reminder of the simple beauty of connection in their evolving world. Mark also encountered the heavy burden of memory. He visited Laura's parents frequently, their grief, the unending ache of a wound that would never fully heal. Those meetings transformed into a shared understanding, an alliance forged out of sorrow, finding solace in their mutual dedication to honor Laura's memory. They spoke of resilience, pointing out that while justice had been served, awareness and education would be far more powerful in keeping future tragedies at bay. In quiet moments, Mark pondered the fragility of life, the unpredictability of human connections, and the stark reality that no community was immune to heartbreak. Detours would always exist along life's path, and healing was a complex journey, often requiring guideposts made from compassion, understanding, and fortitude. As seasons turned and they gathered stories of Laura from students and friends anew, Mark realized something critical. Reflection could turn into action. The past was not just an ending. It was a foundation for building a future that honored vulnerability through vigilance. In Silver Creek, Laura had become a beacon. Her presence felt in every lesson taught and every life touched. It was a tribute to the fact that even in loss, something incredibly beautiful could be born, a mosaic of strength and hope that would persevere long after the last gavel had struck.